Greetings and welcome to an extra ecologically responsible episode of Genre Grinder. With me today is returning special guest Justin Clark. Please introduce yourself, Justin, for anyone who may have forgotten who you are.
Hello there. My name is Justin Clark. I'm a writer for Slant Magazine, GameSpot, Kotaku, a bunch of other places where people yell at me for money and fun. Yeah, and basically just I am on to talk about some ecological horror today.
This is sort of a companion piece to an episode that Justin and I recorded before about disaster movies, which involves a lot of natural disasters. I believe we covered Dante's Peak, which is a volcano, and I think we did 2012, which is basically every ecological disaster imaginable. But we didn't really cover movies where the disaster was direct result of some sort of pollution or something in the other. Then Ariani, who is a mutual friend here, we did an episode on killer animal movies, and I mentioned on that that's often referred to as eco horror, and so I feel like eco horror overlaps between all the stuff we're going to be talking about today and killer animal movies, because we're going to be kind of talking about killer animals today and disaster movies. So I wanted to talk specifically about movies with man-made pollution causes some kind of horror to happen. And so like I said, we're going to have a little bit of overlap. But as this podcast goes on, that's just sort of inevitable that I'm going to have overlap. And also, this was mostly my idea, so if this episode sucks, blame me, not Justin. But yeah, I don't really have. Do you have any other introduction kind of thing you need to say?
Not really, although just like this did dovetail really nicely with a bunch of the movies and games I've been watching this year.
Oh, cool.
Where like now we're starting to get into like, kind of end of the year stuff for both games and movies, and just noticing just a lot of running themes going on, and a lot of it does have to do with we are ruining the planet, and we are going to pay heavily for that in the very near future. Like, it's kind of in the air. So this was a really interesting little deep dive to how we got here to begin with.
The most dread I may have felt in my adult life watching something about a ecological disaster like the end of the world and just being inevitable was the cut scenes in the first Horizon Zero Dawn, where she finds out what happened to the world.
Oh God, yeah, that entire stretch just put the fear of God in me so
Because
bad
you're just
for a
like,
couple
yeah,
weeks.
if this technology existed, companies and crypto bros would definitely use it to the point that it kills everything in the world. It's
Yeah, and I
like,
mean, they push that a little bit further in Forbidden West as well, because there's a
yeah,
whole mission that's about just like this one tech, the one tech bro that kind of ruined everything for Zero Dawn to begin with, just casing himself off in a vault with like two of his assistants and his wife and his daughter, and just having this plan in his head, like he's gonna repopulate the earth with like superior
right.
genetic power, and it's fucking horrifying. It's so well done, but just it's so unnerving.
It's just one of those things where it's like, well, this is a joke world where this can't really happen, but then just things keep happening in the real world that are just like, man. So okay, well, let's jump into it. We're going to start kind of far back in 1971 with Godzilla versus Hedorah. And this was released in the US as Godzilla versus the Smog Monster, and that's how I saw it on VHS tape as a lad. The name Hedorah is a reference to the Japanese word hidoro, which is sludge. So I think Godzilla versus the Sludge Monster would have been a more specific, but necessarily better title, because I think smog was something that was on people's mind in 1971, whereas sludge would just imply that it was a blob monster.
That just makes it sound like he was on a mission against sludge metal. Just all of a
Yeah,
sudden,
yeah,
Candlemas is in grave danger, and
yeah. I mean, from a horrible, Godzilla's just going to try to step on them. He does not like
right.
their sound. Godzilla's a black metal fan. I'm going to be honest right off the top and say I've wanted to cover this movie forever now, but I didn't want to cover it in conjunction with the other Toho kaiju movies. So I kind of worked backwards. As soon as you didn't have a specific thing in mind, I kind of worked backwards. Like, how can we talk about Godzilla versus Hedorah? What kind of movie is this? and it's like it's an environmental horror movie. And then I remembered I had some other movies on a list, so I decided, yeah, let's work backwards from there, because this isn't just one of my favorite movies, because there's a lot of movies that are my favorite movies, but this was like a foundational movie for me that sort of informs what became my taste in film. A lot of people my age would say Back to the Future and Goonies, or if they're like dark kids, they would say Nightmare on Elm Street were like their foundational movies. And of course, Star Wars is everybody's fucking foundational movie, so I'm not going to pretend that's not me too. But for me, there, because of cable TV, I got sort of obsessed with a couple random movies, which were Conquest of the Planet of the Apes. My dad watched Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension, so that was one of the few VHSs we owned. And then he let me see Big Trouble in Little China. So kind of weird. But then also my version of Goonies was Empire of the Sun. I had a friend who was obsessed with World War II air battles, and so we watched that over and over again. And then the one movie I would rent and watch again and again was Godzilla versus Hedorah. I liked all the Godzilla movies, but this was the one I got sort of obsessed with at a young age.
Which is interesting because so when we brought it up for this topic, I was like, well, I mean, technically, every Godzilla movie is
Exact,
an
yes.
ecological horror movie. This one just kind of leans more into it's not just nuclear power that's screwing everything up, it is literally human pollution and intervention and just all the toxic waste that we're dumping everywhere.
It's like
And
it's something that normal people contribute to, whereas the nuclear fallout is something that government decided to do.
right, yeah, this one is all on us. And I mean, I don't know. The thing with this one is just it's such a tonal change up from minute to minute.
Mm-hmm. I
Where
think
like it's oh, go
that's
ahead.
why I liked it as a kid, is because it's like 8 different movies.
Yeah, I mean, like it starts off where it's just this very like mournful, just like we're looking at all this toxic sludge dumped into Tokyo and just going like, how can this happen? Like you kind of expect like that crying Indian to show up at one point,
Yeah, yeah,
and it
exactly.
goes
Yeah,
from that to Godzilla having a Bond intro question mark.
yeah, yeah. The music here. Well, the music is a lot of. I'm gonna. Well, I was gonna explain the plot, but you don't really need to know much other than it's a Godzilla movie, and it was made at a point when they were shoving these out one a year, and they were just introducing a new monster for Godzilla to fight. In this case, yeah, literally a. We find out later he's a space monster. He's like fell from Earth from a meteor. He's some sort of small little creature. He absorbs things, he gets more powerful. Godzilla's normal stuff isn't enough to really do much. He's not fire isn't a problem. So and nuclear charged fire is probably good for him. But yes, the opening titles are, like you said, the Crying Indian. I hadn't put that together, but yeah, that there's an old ad. I don't remember. I think it was just a public service announcement, and it was showing how like nasty people were just littering the highways, and then it closes in on a native guy who was actually an Italian actor who got famous playing native guys. He cries a little bit. I mean, that ad was supposed to make us. It's a very 70s ad. But the thing that makes this movie so amusing is that then it bursts into this banger hippie jam. I guess the Japanese version, there's a Japanese and an English one. I assume you watched the Japanese dub of this.
I did.
And even if you don't, I don't think that there's currently on digital available a version. If you watch the Criterion one in English, I think it still plays the Japanese title song. Not but So it's Kaisi Taiyowu, which is Return the Sun, but I think it's actually Return the Sun, like two statements. It's sung by Kiko Mari, and it's performed by Honey Knights and the Moondrops. And it was apparently the lyrics were all written by the director.
And they
This
just
is
matched the music up to those lyrics, and this is what they came up with. In case you were confused that this didn't take place in 1971.
Yeah, it's and the English version is called Save the Earth, and it's Save the Earth. Yeah, like that was the version I always heard when I was a kid. This is the only movie that Yoshimitsu Banno ended up directing. He had been an assistant director for Kurosawa, which is a kind of an ongoing thing. A lot of these really good Toho directors worked under Kurosawa at some point, it seems. His story was that he was put in charge of a Pavilion Expo exhibit at this, I don't know what it was exactly. It was a Mitsubishi, like, those exhibits they used to do. I don't know exactly what their purpose is, but it was called The Birth of the Japanese Islands, and he had put together this sort of audiovisual thing using mirrors and special effects. And the people in charge of the franchise were very impressed by it and sort of brought him on, and they gave him a movie to make. And the ultimate rumor is that that he himself backed up is that the powers that be absolutely hated this film, even though it was a modest hit, and now is a cult classic, but it was a modest hit, and banned him from ever making another Godzilla movie.
And yet
Which
they
I think,
didn't ban Dean Devlin and Emmerich from doing one, which that's a
right,
choice.
right, and it's always this sort of funny thing, because I think this is a really well directed movie, despite how its silliness and its huge tonal flips. I mean, I'm a big Godzilla fan, and I love the Showa period, which is what you call these movies, between the original Godzilla and Terror of Mechagodzilla in 1975. But they have problems. They look. There's a reason why people get down on them and treat them like so bad it's so good movies. It's because they looked cheap, and they were cheap, and they were reusing stuff. And I think that this movie just is really special in the way it was shot. They have something written into the script at one point that Hidora can only that the sunlight hurts him. So a lot of the kaiju battles are in darkness, and it really sells the special effects because they're not in broad daylight, as tends to happen with the other movies.
Yeah, I am very much in the like the more serious Godzilla is, the better the movie kind of is. Like the sillier stuff I can get on board with, like just, oh look, there's that monster, he's awesome. But that's
Yeah,
not my tempo usually with Godzilla. And for me, the best parts of this were just you just saw this unnatural, just black sludge just crawling across streets and crawling downstairs. It was like the Blob, almost like the 88 Blob, rather,
yeah,
where it's
oh
just
yeah,
this black nonsense just absolutely consuming the countryside. And then finally it takes off, like, it reaches its final form, and it's like just flying across the country and spreading sulfuric acid and just watching all these people crumble the dust like it's War of the Worlds. That stuff is absolutely incredible and horrifying, even for like a production as, again, budget as this.
yeah. And apparently this one came in under budget and under time. It was shot in like 35 days, is what the description. I got a lot of my information. It wasn't a lot to go on. I don't have a lot of books on the subject, but there was a 208 blog post from a defunct site called the Tokyo Reporter that included an interview with Bono. But yeah, so the fact that this still at a point where they were really trying to make these children's films, so it's clearly still a children's film, and that the little boy is one of the main protagonists. I like the idea that he's introduced playing with Godzilla and other kaiju monster toys.
Yeah, I've always loved that element of like a monster shows up in the populace, so it's just like, well, here's another $27 billion worth of damage again.
Yeah, and so, like, yeah, that's the idea, is that these things are they make money. If somebody's making money off these monsters, it's like playing with hurricanes.
Right.
Here's my Hurricane Andrew model that I'm going to play with. And uh, but at the same time, the real reason is because Toho's trying to make little kids want to buy these toys, which it worked. As I was seeing this, 20 some years after the original release, and I really wanted all those Godzilla toys. Yeah, so it's there's parts of it that are definitely aimed at little kids, and this is a case where the more disturbing stuff kind of makes the little kid stuff makes it even maybe a little bit more disturbing in a way, because it's like disaster striking a children's film. I always like movies where it's like slasher movies that have that sort of party movie that gets interrupted by a murderer type vibe. I like that kind of thing.
Yeah, and this one in particular, I mean, I grew up watching a lot of Godzilla movies as well, like even, the older ones in particular. And even by those standards, just the fact that like this gets interrupted by a straight up cartoon sequence multiple times
Yes.
even
Yes.
is like I was just sitting there like, okay, this one was definitely meant to be a kids film, which makes the fact that it just goes as dark as it does from time to time just really, really just interesting. And I don't know. Again, they really went for some swings here, and I'm not entirely sure it worked for me, but I can respect the fact that all that's still in there.
It's funny, the when asked about those anime clips, Bono said that there was a manga magazine at that same expo, but it's not really clear if someone handed this to him or if it was just something else. But he refers to it. He says, "quote one of those 100 beautiful companion girls pinup books." So he saw like a pervy, early stage, like 1970, 1969, little pervy anime pinup book, and said, "Ah, this is what kids want. Well, let's add some cartoons to it." And I think it's really funny because it doesn't really the human beings, we see a couple of people and it kind of looks like that. I'm gonna butcher this name, Laiji Matsumoto style. He's the one who did Battleship Yamato and Captain
Ah,
Harlock, and they sort of used him for the Daft Punk movie.
Interstellar 555.
Yeah, yeah, that guy's style. Some of the humans look a little like that, but a lot of the other animation has this sort of sketchy, abstract style that makes me think more of what you would see on Sesame Street or the Electric Company back
Yeah,
in the
that
day.
was my thought. Like there's the one that I really liked, which is just like this factory just gobbling up all the plants from all around it, and it just builds up and builds up and builds up until it becomes Hedora.
Yeah,
And yeah, like that is definitely something where like if you were going to explain pollution to a child in the 1970s, that's about what I would come up with.
and then there's another one that's like a public service announcement telling you to keep yourself safe with from toxic Hedora, because something that happens throughout the movie is not only is he knocking down buildings and stuff, but Hedora is slowly poisoning the atmosphere the whole time. So it's a sort of existential threat that, because it's this movie, if you remade this movie, you would make it a much more serious existential threat. You would show how bad life is in on the island of Japan with all the people probably dying in the streets and stuff. Instead, we get this little animated clip. But for me, it was really funny because I rewatched all of the Godzilla movies as one of my things to do during COVID lockdown. So when they
Hmm.
had this whole public service wear a mask when you go outside thing, it made it all a little extra surreal for me.
The other thing that struck me is that fact of, this monster exists, but now it's ruining things for everybody in Japan and not just from nuclear fire.
Hmm.
And what that reminded me of more than anything else was Shin Godzilla, which was like the
Hmm.
first one to really go back to just the fact of this monster existing is going to be an ecological disaster for everybody.
Yeah, Shin Godzilla makes it almost a Lovecraftian thing. Like the original movie Shin Godzilla, they kind of make Godzilla an unknowing terror that just comes out, whereas later movies, even the scarier ones, tended to make him like either a more spiritual, like righteous, nature's righteous revenge against us, or he's our protector and he's this ancient protector, or they would try to explain it. So in some versions he's a dinosaur that was accidentally hyper brought into, it's there's a lot of ways that Godzilla comes about. But yeah, Shin Godzilla is this sort of Lovecraftian idea. And I think that in a different version of Hedora would be the same thing, where Hedora is just something, instead of being a space alien, Hedora is something that exists. And, if we go through history, the planet would be carbon soaked, for millions of years at a time if you go way back in ancient geological time, and it would kill off animals and stuff. Like, this isn't the only time we've had global warming. Like, this is minor compared to what has happened in our past. So that the idea that Hedora was always here and that he just goes into hiding and we're bringing him back because we're throwing shit in the rivers.
Yeah, which again, like it's very much in parallel to just what we conceive of as Godzilla now. It's just like something's going wrong on the planet. This guy's going to come back and set things right. Only in
Yeah.
this case, it's just like, well, the planet's going to be ruined. Now there's this monster that is uniquely suited to live on this planet if that's the way things are going.
And
Which makes it
for
really weird that Godzilla even shows up to like, fight him. It's just like, yeah, he's ruining the planet worse than anything else, but just like he's kind of not at fault here. I would be blowing
No,
up every factory in existence if that was
it's
me. If I
like
was a 50-foot reptile.
it's like the old like Godzilla makes things go into balance, which is something they've really clombed onto with the legendary Warner Brothers movies. Is that Godzilla is not necessarily a good or evil; he just balances things. I think
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
sort of what they're going for here. And you were talking about how Hedora is basically a blob, and he is. I mean, his design is cool because he's a big. He's like he's a man in a suit, but they've draped it, and so he's kind of drippy, and he's got these two big sideways cat eyes, and so he's very alien looking. He doesn't look like a giant dinosaur or reptile or bug. Most Godzilla things are a reptile or a bug that just got really big. So he's a little more abstract, and he has some gruesome side effects. If he touches you, it burns your flesh, and they don't hold back on some of the flesh burn effects are pretty gross for a kids movie.
Yeah, like what it reminded me of. So, like a couple of weeks ago, I ended up getting a screener for the new Julia DeCurno movie, Alpha,
Hmm.
which has this whole thing where, like, instead, like, it's kind of an allegory for the AIDS crisis. It doesn't entirely work, but that's a different podcast. But they have this whole thing where, like, instead of AIDS being the big, epidemic around the mid 80s, it's this whole thing where, like, people who are infected with this disease start turning into living marble.
Oh,
And
okay.
it was striking how much the effect here of what happens when Hedora touches you looks like how that ended up working in Alpha is just like this gray matter that just ends up sloughing off of human bodies, and it's really, again, unnerving
Yeah,
for
yeah.
a kids movie.
Christine said something about the thing that happens in Game of Thrones where they turn into stone. I can't remember what
Yeah,
that condition.
grayscale.
Grayscale. She thought, yeah, when the doctor, who's sort of him and his son are kind of the main characters. It's so funny. The doctor spends basically the whole movie after that in bed. They even are rolling him into places in bed. It's very he. It must have been very cozy for the actor to
Oh
make
no,
this
that's good
movie.
work if you can get it. Just
Yeah, he probably didn't have to wear much costume because he has a blanket up to his neck, so he could have been wearing whatever he wanted under there.
didn't even have to
Just
get in the makeup for most of the day. He's just
no,
like,
just
oh, half my face is going to be covered. Yeah,
yeah,
I'm not coming in
yeah.
5 a.m. for this.
But yeah, so Hidora can do that, and then as he gets stronger, and pollutes more, it his pollution kills people by them breathing it, and then as he gets even stronger, it scalds people down to the bone and just turns people. And I remember that actually scaring me as a kid, like thinking maybe I'm not supposed to be watching this. One of those look around to see if a parent is watching because Hidora just melted a bunch of poor people as he
Yeah,
flew
like
over
just
them.
flying across the countryside, and just whoever he touches just automatically just laid to waste. Yeah, and again, like I still feel like that's a thing that's just in the air all of a sudden, because minor spoilers for this one, but you should watch it anyway. But like there's a thing that happens near the end of Begonia, which
Mm.
is very much kind of calls back to how Hedora moves in terms of just flying over a place and just everybody just kind of falls down dead immediately.
Did
And
you
just
ever
the fact, go
see
ahead.
Save the Green Planet?
I did. It was
Okay,
years upon years
I
ago,
can't
but
remember how that ends. So
it ends where, like, I suppose I should premise it with just like this is an ending for Save the Green Planet more than Begonia.
yeah,
But yeah, what ends up happening is, like, this guy kidnaps this CEO and thinks
right.
that they're actually an alien from outer space, and, like, they get to his laboratory, the kidnapper gets shot dead, only to find out, oh no, the CEO is actually an alien. They were all right, and he has to make a decision as to whether the human race is even worth saving at this point. He decides the answer is no, and
Right.
they just straight up Death Star the planet.
That's right. It's more like what if the day the earth stood still went bad. I forgot about that.
Yeah,
That's
and
the so Begonia changes the ending though.
I don't want to spoil it just because it's
Okay.
still out
No,
in
no,
theaters
don't
and
spoil
more
because I
people
haven't
need to
seen it.
watch
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
I will
Yeah.
simply say that there's a lot of crossover here with how Kira moves, and just,
Cool.
I don't know, there's a lot of that floating around. Whereas just this idea of, like, if death is going to come, it's going to slay multiple people indiscriminately all at once, and it's not even going to be like flashy or like Independence Day kind of ooh flashy
Right.
explosions kind of deal. It's just going to be very mundane. Like everything is just going to stop one day, And that was the thing that just terrified the crap out of me watching this. And again, this is the same movie that has like a 70s style, like talking heads, like, what are we going to do montage in
I mean,
between mass death.
because there's like a subplot involving teenagers and 20 somethings that are supposed to, like, it's very obvious that this movie was made by people who are too old to be part of the counterculture and are trying. It's very similar to like Roger Corman movies, like, I don't know, I think this is what beatniks are like, you know. He's not really
Well, it's
one of
also
them.
Japan, where like, oh, up until like the early 2000s, like, the common joke was always like they were 10 years behind us. So
Yeah,
like them being 10 years back would have put them right in the hippie era for them. I'm not sure if that correlates to just what youth culture was actually doing in Japan at the time. But yeah, like they're just up on a mountain. They're like, well, we're all gonna die. Let's just have a love in on the mountain and just, see what happens.
yeah, that's their
And
ultimate plan, is to, yeah, and it doesn't work out.
yeah, no, and it's really hilarious because like you just have like the lead hippie up on a mountain playing this like actually really good mournful guitar tune up on a mountain that like it sounds like that acoustic Opeth album. It sounds really really good, and then just all of a sudden out of nowhere he's just sort of like, "Hey, that's too sad. Let's have a love in," and just
Yeah,
everybody gets up and dances around the bonfire, and it's just like, what the hell am I watching right now?
that song and Return the Sun, that what they feel like is the very sort of, I think they're banger songs. I need to make it clear I love these songs, but they sort of sound like the corporate version of what a corporation of older people, probably men, think rock music sounds like in 1970.
Yeah, for
And
sure. Like I've again, like I had notes on it as well, and the image that kept coming up for me was just like if Don Draper was around at this point, this is where he gets his Coca
mm,
Cola ad idea from the finale.
yeah,
Like this is where he is.
hell, that's about a right. That's about the right timing, actually, because doesn't that show end with 1970? Does it, or does it
Yeah,
go into?
exactly. The
Yeah,
last spot is him going into meditation amongst a bunch of hippies, and he wakes up having come up with the whole
the
"have a
Coke
Coke and a
ad.
smile" thing.
Yeah, for all I know, in the universes might overlap. Maybe in the longer version of Mad Men, he goes and gets a job at Toho and advises them on stuff like this. But what
And
the thing
Don
the
Draper
songs,
getting taken out by acid by a flying smog
yes,
monster.
yes, by the small, or stepped on
That's the
by,
real finale right there. Fuck you, Matthew Weiner.
yeah. um but what the music reminds me of in this is what you'd see on Laugh-In, you know, that's sort of
Yeah.
like, and then they have the background stuff, so there's a whole party scene before that, that doesn't really go anywhere. It's really an excuse to replay the song and show people dancing, but one of the characters is drinking, and I think the idea is he's actually smoking pot or doing LSD, but they can't show that for censorship reasons. So he's drinking and he starts hallucinating that everybody is wearing these fish masks, and it's this really surreal bizarre moment that I love so much, and I want them to have actually made these fish masks that you can buy, because they cover like your whole head and they look very silly.
That was my other question that I never actually did the research on. Was that song actually a hit single in Japan?
I couldn't find anything on it, how big of a hit it was. I looked into it, and it seems like it probably got some play just because the movie itself was a modest hit. It wasn't one of the bigger hit Godzillas, but at a time when the movies were struggling, it did okay. So my guess is it had some sales. I also forgot to say, yeah, the Save the Earth version is sung by Adrian Russ, and she and Guy Hemrick, who does a lot of this kind of thing, they rewrote those lyrics. The original lyrics, I'm trying to remember if I wrote this down. Yes, Bono said that the lyrics for the original song were inspired by reading the 1962 environmental science book Silent Spring by Rachel Carson, which is this sort of expose about pesticides during World War II. And that book is partially responsible for the creation of the EPA. This book was such a phenomenon that like it ends up on Nixon's list of these are things that we can do to make people like us again. So he read the same book and wrote Bring Back the Sun based on what he read in this book. And then also the other funny note I have is that there's the, I don't know what you call it, but there's this sort of thing that you have in a lot of hippie movies. It's this dance thing where you have a super close up on basically just vinegar and food coloring, and it's like throbbing in the background. It's just like a thing. It's like a disco ball a couple years later, but they would have these like these panels of just this whoop 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 looking thing, and it's cool because it kind of fits in with what Hedora is. And when asked where he got the idea for it, he claims that they saw it at a gay club in Chicago. It doesn't give any other information as why were they at a gay club in Chicago, what gay club was it, why were you in Chicago, what's going
Oh,
on here,
he
guys,
was
this
definitely
sounds really
taking
interesting.
something. Oh yeah, he was on something when he came up with this, but you can't say that in Japan. So
It was at a gay club in Chicago. Like it's something I've seen. I think even Laugh-In does it. The blobby thing. I don't know what you call it, but it's just that was a funny little like. I wish this interview was bigger. The he actually he passed away um in 2020. I think.
oh
God,
wow,
God, I hope it wasn't from COVID. That would be
you,
an extra
right?
bummer.
Just
But the fact that he was that the producer hated him so much means that that for years he was trying to get a sequel to this off the ground, and even when he was fired they were still considering doing a sequel to this because it had made enough money. But I guess the producers just were so they were like, no, we're not going to do this again. uh,
right. Like immediately after this, I think is Mecha Godzilla the immediate one after this, or was it
Yeah,
with something
it's
else?
actually it's Gigan who is like
Okay,
a pre mecha. It's an also a mechanical monster, a partially mechanical monster. Gigan has the razor blade thing in his stomach.
yeah.
It's also a really good one, Gigan, and then it was Megalodon, which is one that has Jet Jaguar in it, and most
Oh,
people consider the nadir of the series, but was another huge favorite when I was a kid because I had never seen
none of
Ultraman.
them.
I had never seen Ultraman. I didn't know any better. I thought Jack Jaguar was pretty cool. Another thing that I love about the Showa era movies is that they'll have scenes with monsters arguing in monster speech. And
Yes.
I can't remember which one it is. One of them does have subtitles. It's one where Mothra is trying to convince Godzilla to help. I think it's Ghidorah, the three-headed monster. I think it's that one. But this one doesn't have any subtitles. And there's totally a scene where Godzilla and Ghidorah have an argument and don't really know what the if Godzilla's saying, "Hey, get out of here," and Hedorah's saying, "No, I don't wanna." But it's sort of the subtext of it, and I think it's really funny that they do that in these movies because like the kid in the audience knows exactly what's going on. We you don't have to tell a kid, "Oh yeah, these are monsters fighting." And they're having an argument, and you don't need to know what they're saying. It's not important.
Yeah, like the need to re-explain kind of every little aspect of what Godzilla is doing in the new ones is one of the things I think is a flaw.
Yeah,
And I do like that Adam Wingard is kind of leaning away from that, kind of by necessity, because Toho won't let him do a lot of stuff with Godzilla.
right.
But at the
And
same time, it's just they don't over-explain like what Godzilla's going to do at any given moment, and it keeps them interesting. And the same thing's happening with these, where it's just like, yeah, Godzilla just does stuff that frees them up to do whatever they want to with them.
one of my favorite things is in this movie in particular. This movie doesn't have much of a military presence, which I think is interesting, and I had never thought about it until I watched it this time because the military, it's like part of Godzilla lore, like to the point where Neon Genesis is sort of making fun of the fact that the military is totally ineffective against giant monsters. Like there's a whole, to me actually, at least that's the way I read a lot of early episodes of Neon Genesis, is that literally you have to go esoteric to defeat these things
Yeah,
because
like everything has to come down to this 1 12-year-old who's depressed. Like the
yeah.
military is no match for him.
And going back to the original Godzilla, the military can't do anything. You have to go to a scientist. And so,
Yeah, well, I mean, for this one, like, just literally guns will do absolutely nothing. They're just going to shoot through this blob and nothing's,
and they
there's
don't
nothing
even,
to be done.
the thing I think is interesting, and I think this is probably just for time and budget, but the thing that's interesting is that it's like the military just going like, well, there's a new monster. We just got to hang out until a scientist figures out a way to stop it. But the scientist figures out the way to do it is you have to dry him out basically, and so he helps the military set up this. There's it's pretty reasonably suspenseful sequence where Godzilla, who has gotten his ass whomped, and basically there's a disturbing scene where Hidora tries to bury him in a shallow grave. He beats up Godzilla
Right.
to the point where he can't fight back. He drops him in a hole, and then he just starts pouring sludge on him and laughs while he's doing it. And Godzilla does that horrible "I'm hurt" cry. The I hate that,
Right.
the really high pitched Godzilla. Oh no, Godzilla's hurt. But so Godzilla has to come back. He's fighting. He's winning this time, and he figures out what the army's doing. Like nobody's on a loudspeaker shouting, "Godzilla, line him up with the laser beam" or whatever, anything like that. Godzilla just sort of observes what's happening. Ah, this electricity hurts it. The humans are trying to make this electricity. I'll go put him there. Oh, the electricity isn't turning on because they don't have power. I bet my breath will power this. And so it's like, it's, I don't know. It was like a nice. I like them. I like it in the movies when Godzilla and the humans. That's like one of my favorite things about. Is it the second of the legendary movies where Godzilla? There's a shot of Godzilla going towards Hedra. No, Ghidorah, and there are military planes at his back. Yeah,
Yes,
we're
yeah,
on the
that was the
same
second one.
side. I love that kind of thing. So like the idea that Godzilla is like, all right, these humans aren't worthless. They have science. They just need me to help them with it. I love that scene. But yeah, no, no
Yeah,
point is it. Do they launch a million missiles into Hedora just to watch it not work? At this point, they're just like, well, that never works against any of
right.
these.
Yeah, reminds me of one of my favorite jokes from the animated series, where Dinosaur Neil is a thing, and he's like, "Welp."
Yeah.
They're like, Mayor? What are we gonna do right now?" And he's like, "Welp, I'll answer that with a question. How fast can you swim?" But seriously, we're gonna hang back and wait for the National Guard.
Yeah. Let me see. What else do I got here? There's a little cat that gets oozed on, but not dissolved, fortunately.
I
At
know. I
worst,
was about to be pissed if that cat
yeah.
had died.
No, at worst, the cat just looks really uncomfortable because they literally poured goop on the cat, and so it's just sad. I don't know why the cat's at a dance club. I guess maybe the idea is it got rolled up in the street while Hidora's ooze was going down the street, and it just sort of got picked up along with
Either way, the cat's alive. Everything's good.
everything's fine. The cat was at most was a little uncomfortable on set. I'll
The
be
one that
fine now.
got me is the fact that this movie literally ends with Godzilla having a comeback Shane moment.
There's part of this that says that the kid, it's not said specifically, but the kid has like a psychic connection with Godzilla that it's not really explained, but the kid always knows that Godzilla's on his way or is going to be here soon. I thought that was really strange.
Right, like there's one moment where like Godzilla literally uses The Shining to say, "Hey, warn the humans, like get out of my way. I'm gonna fight this alien." I'm just
Yeah.
like, kid, how the hell do you know that?
Yeah. Yeah. Here's a question. We going back to the animation. Do you think Mr. DNA from Jurassic Park was inspired at all by the little atoms and the nuclear bomb description in this movie, in this animated sequence? Like, I wouldn't put it past Spielberg likes Godzilla movies. We know that
I
he
more
does.
think of it more like like Spielberg likes Looney Tunes in general, especially like
Yeah.
kind of that late '60s, early '70s period where like they were really throwing shit at the wall,
Yeah.
and it just kind of has that kind of janky little like stick figure style that I think a lot of those cartoons ended up having, which I think that's what he's more keying off of than anything else.
Okay. Well, I'm just going to
I
say,
won't. I will not destroy your illusions if that's where we
yeah.
want to go with
And if I say it with enough conviction, it will probably end up on IMDb trivia.
it.
At some point, someone will add it, citing me. Something I should mention, and we should always mention in when we talk about Toho kaiju movies, is the special effects director Tsuruyoshi Nakano. He probably should be credited as co-director because even though Bono had experience with the special effects, he was mostly leaving that stuff, to the setups and stuff, and he should get a lot of credit for how good comparatively good the special effects are in this movie. I mean, yes, they are miniatures, but again, if you compare it to a lot of the movies that surrounded it, they're really good miniatures. And they're getting a lot of mileage out of very few miniatures. There's not that many little sets in this one, as opposed to some of the more expensive ones where they make several sets to destroy. And then there is a note that the special effects director, really wanted to make a scary Godzilla movie, whereas Bono wanted to make a children's movie. So I think part of the mix and match tone should be credited to the fact that these guys weren't really getting along and what the movie should be, which is always fascinating to me because like some great movies are like one auteur's vision, and some great movies are because nobody got along and couldn't decide what the movie was, and it was reshot. And like Ravenous is a big version of this, where Ravenous was nothing but garbage behind the scenes and ended up being one of my favorite movies. So sometimes it works out to have an annoying producer breathing down your neck or a cinematographer that doesn't get along with you, I think.
Yeah, I mean, really, like when it comes down to it, it comes down to that Godzilla design that they were using in like the late '60s, early
The
'70s,
big
which is
eyeball one, yeah.
the big eyeball one with the derpy look on his face.
The sort of
And
cute one, yeah, yeah.
yeah, once you have that Godzilla in place, like it's kind of impossible to have a really scary one, but
Right.
they did try here.
And then also there was a note saying that because the producer hated it so much, it was handed to Ishiro Honda, who is the original director who did the majority of the Showa era movies and the majority of just the good Toho. He did Rodan and Mothra and all those. He apparently watched a rough cut and supplied advice, and so IMDb has him credited as co-director. I don't think he was co-director. I think that he just sort of said you need to do this and this because it will work better because it's a
Right.
Godzilla movie.
Was this around the time where like Toho finally had kind of like their, I don't know, lore sheet, I guess you would want to call it, where just like anybody who wanted to make a Godzilla movie, here are the rules and they need to be followed? Was that around
I
when
mean,
they?
at this point, you're still having Honda direct most of them. I think Bono and there was one other director, Motoyoshi Oda, who did Godzilla Raids Again. Those are the only two guys that only did one Godzilla movie apiece at the time. Otherwise, there were just three other guys directing all of them. So I think it was at the end of this that they have Honda. I don't know for sure, but I think at the end of this is when Honda sort of like helps them create like the must the yeah the thing you're talking about, like the list of things you can and can't do. But I don't think it was established yet at this time. And this movie might have partially inspired it, considering that they didn't like it. So I don't know. Overall, this was long considered one of the worst ones. It's actually in a one of those horrible worst 50 worst movies of all time, 1978. Harry and Michael Medved. If you don't know, Michael Medved is pretty much the worst thing that ever happened to popular film criticism. He and his brother wrote a book called The 50 Worst Films of All Time, and included this movie, the only Godzilla movie they included, and Sam Peckinpah's Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia. So tells you how awful that shit is.
Oh.
Um, though, oh yeah, for those of you who do watch Godzilla movies for the lulls, and I have nothing against that as a fan. I mean, they are silly movies. This is the movie you might know is the one where Godzilla flies by aiming himself backwards and shooting his atomic breath like a jet. That's the silly goofball thing that happens in this movie that sometimes people remember.
Yeah, which I was racking my brain for a while trying to figure out which game it was that actually did have that as a backup move for Godzilla.
I
But I
haven't played
know they
many of
started
those.
put there have been, well, I mean, there's been a couple of just straight up Godzilla films, but there's also this old series called King of the Monsters
Right.
on Neo Geo,
I did play
where like
that.
obviously they took a lot of inspiration from Godzilla, and I forget which of these games where like double tapping back to get away from an opponent, like they actually did use the beam for that.
Nice.
Yeah, I wish
Yeah.
I knew exactly which one it was, but I wasn't able to find it on YouTube in time.
Godzilla versus Megalodon is the one where he slides back on his tail and
Oh
double
yeah.
foot kicks. I love that move too. I remember the first time seeing that as a kid and my friend and I losing our shit and pausing the movie and running around the house because we were so so excited. Like that's like a core memory. Um, but this Hidora's reputation has gotten a lot better. You see him it basically. I try to stop myself from collecting plastic garbage that I don't need, but I've made an exception for Hidora and Vegeta from Dragon Ball. Those are the and xenomorphs. If I find a cool xenomorph, a cool Hidora, or a cool or a funny Vegeta, I will buy it. And there, Hidora and the blind boxes and stuff, he's really picked up. And then the newer IDW comics, he shows up a lot. He's never like a main character, but funnily enough, in the couple I've read, he's one of the good kaiju that shows up to battle the bad kaiju, which I think is very silly because
Huh.
obviously he's not one of the good kaiju. But I think people just like him. And according to Wikipedia, Roger Ebert, Adam Wingard, and Nicolas Cage all consider this among their favorite Godzilla movies. So Oh yeah, I have a hat with a cartoony Hedora on it, and the guy our trivia guy recognized it and said, "Is that Hedora?" And I said, "Yes, that is Hedora." He actually
Did we just
recognized it.
become best friends? Yep.
Yeah, basically. It was funny too because he was like a mustachioed guy, and Christine said, "Oh, this guy looks like he's going to be annoying." And then the first thing he does is, "Oh, is that Hedora?" It's like, "Oh no, guess he's not." Bono has a producing, even though he's oh no, he died in 2017, not 2020. Bono has an executive production credit on all of the legendary Godzilla movies and the Monarch TV show, but I couldn't figure out why. But like all but one of those were released after he died, so I don't know what that's about. And then the director of Godzilla Minus One, it sounds like we have Godzilla Minus Zero is coming out, and everybody knows what's going to be going on with it. I've been trying to avoid spoilers. There was talk briefly where he said that he wanted to make a Hedora movie, which I think would have been a really cool follow up, but maybe we can wait for like the third in this new series. Um,
Yeah, I've stayed away from spoilers on that new one as well, just because minus one was such a surprise, and I would
yeah,
like to replicate that.
there's a rumor that they're also going to make Ano is going to make a Shin Godzilla 2, which would be really cool if we just
Yeah, that's been going around for a while, and after the last two things he made have actually done really well. I still haven't seen Shin Ultraman, but
Shin
that's in the
Ultraman is
future.
fun. I haven't seen Shin
Common Rider.
Common Rider. Yeah, I haven't seen that one yet. He and the other director whose name is escaping me, and I'm not going to have time to look it up. They've switched off with those. So he produced and wrote Shin Ultraman, but didn't direct it, and then he directed Shin Kamen Rider, and he finished Neon Genesis as much as you could possibly finish Neon Genesis. It's so fucking finished at this point. It's been finished
Right. Like,
4 times now. It's very, very done. So he can
like
move
he
on
gave
from
him a
it.
happy ending this time. Just
Yeah.
walk
Oh,
away. Like,
I loved it. I loved the whole rebuild. I
so
loved it
did
so much.
I.
But so yeah, I'd love it if he came back. But yeah, it'd be cool if in this minus one universe Godzilla, if he would fight Hedora, because we're what is that? That's at the end of World War II right now. We're going to be going into this. They pushed it up a bit. They can be in the 60s, the late 60s. That'd be cool.
Yeah, as it is, I mean, like the minus one ended with kind of like this disease that seems to be caused directly by Godzilla. If there's a ecological backlash
Yeah.
to that, and there's a whole other thing that comes out of it. I mean, yeah, slots right in.
I guess the only other note I have here is something you sort of said that Godzilla sort of has a Bond theme. The composer Richiiro Manabe, he also did Godzilla versus Megalon. He doesn't use many of the original themes, which I think is really interesting, and I hadn't thought about that before. And I don't think his theme for Godzilla was ever used again. But it is very strange, and it turns a lot of people off. Some people really hate this Godzilla theme. It has these gnarly, droopy horns and this slow surf guitar thing. It's kind of sludgy. It sounds sort of like a 50s striptease song in a way.
And
Um,
yeah, totally see that. Although the original theme, somebody brought this up when they were talking about minus one a while back, as a matter of fact, where they were saying that it's always a mistake that that original 1954 theme is like associated with Godzilla himself, when really it's supposed to be kind of a rallying song for the troops that are going to be fighting
right.
him. And with this one, especially where the military isn't that much of a deal, yeah, you would have to have something different that
Yeah, I
doesn't
mean, especially
apply.
the because there's the two major the ba 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 da 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 that I mean that theme is like the coolest thing ever. But yeah, it wouldn't have fit this movie. But I like this Godzilla theme because it has the energy of an old man coming out of the ocean and going, "Fuck,
Like, damn
I
kids, get off my lawn.
I'm too old for this shit, and I gotta take care of your pollution now. God
Like,
damn, you
cheese
know."
it, boys. We're on old man Godzilla's property now.
Yeah, exactly. I love, and so I like it, but I get why it is it's a very wow wow kind of thing. It's very strange. I'll agree with everybody. Basically, I understand why people don't like this movie, but I think it's amazing, and it's one of my all-time favorites.
The heart
Uh,
wants what it wants, man.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, but I wrote too many notes about that. We took too much time, so let's move on. Let's move on. We're going to go up to 2012. There was a couple things I asked you originally. I thought of some movies from this sort of post 9/11, early Obama era. There was this movie we ended up coming was The Bay. And the other one we were thinking about coming was The Thaw. And I'll just really quickly say The Thaw is not a good movie, but it has a really interesting basic concept in that they because global warming has pushed back ice, they find a prehistoric mammal, and it has giant lice that have been frozen in time for billions of years, and they are super horrible, and they like take over your body and turn you into like a zombie thing. And it's a not very good or scary movie. It's got Val Kilmer phoning it in like two scenes. It's like got that Bruce Willis showing up for one day energy going on there, but it's a really interesting idea. Whereas I think The Bay is, um, well, I'm going to go to a hot take right now, and I'm going to say this is my favorite Barry Livingston movie.
I
I,
don't think it's as hot a take as you might think,
I mean,
because just looking over his IMDb after it was over, I'm just like, yeah, that was okay. That was okay. That was
I,
okay. Meanwhile, this was, aside from like a couple nitpicks I'll get into, but I absolutely love this, and I was shocked this didn't get more attention than it did.
yeah, and it's very, very out of character. That's part of the fun of it, is that nobody expected this movie to come from Barry Livingston, who, the Rain Man guy. Like his only other really weird movie is Toys, which is kind of a cool movie that's not doesn't really work, but it's at least visually really interesting. The closest thing I could think of was around this same time, the director of the Killing Fields and the Mission, Roland Joffé.
Jaffe.
Uh, yeah, he made a very bad, very trashy, and very controversial Elijah Cuthbert torture porn movie called Captivity in 2007, and no one could believe he had done this. The difference being is apparently Captivity's producers shot all the torture porn stuff, and it was really just a not good kidnapping movie before that. Whereas this is Mr. Livingston all the way.
Also, before they come for you, it's going to be Levinson.
Yeah, Levinson. I keep saying Livingston like this the character in this book. No,
Yes.
Levinson.
Yeah,
Um,
I only remember that just because there's a town in Jersey where I grew up called Livingston. I can never get
yeah,
that right in my life, or else my entire state will take away my citizenship.
yeah, yeah. Well, it's what. So this movie is a found footage, but it's called a found footage horror, but it's really a mockumentary horror, which is something that I find really interesting because it doesn't usually work, but when that people try really hard, I think it's an interesting idea. And the thing here is that there is a environmental breakdown in Chesapeake Bay during Fourth of July celebration. This is very Jaws coded. It's Fourth of July. It's a small town on the upper East Coast, and there's an asshole mayor who is not taking into account the horrible chicken shit pollution going on in the bay. And so everything goes wrong, and this woman who survived the whole thing has gathered all of the um, telephone, camera phone footage, Skype footage, news footage, everything she could to try to put together a movie about this. And I was already really prone to like this idea because this is exactly what I kind of always wanted a sequel to Cloverfield to be like. I kept on thinking like they could do a movie because to me Cloverfield is one of the ultimate. It's not a perfect movie, but it's one of the ultimate 9/11 analogy movies. And so to me, to make that an even better 9/11 analogy is that most people who weren't living in New York experienced 9/11 flipping through channels frantically trying to figure out what the fuck was going on. That's a lot of people's memories. It's internet era, so some people were on the internet, but it's before you had phones that had it, so you had to be on your TV. And I thought that a really interesting idea would to do a Cloverfield sequel that was made up of news footage and other people's footage and put all together. And then this movie came out, and I'm like, well, this is kind of what I was thinking. So I was kind of predisposed to like to predisposed to like it. But then I've heard that this War of the Worlds remake kind of took that idea and fucked it up. So maybe I'm never going to see another version of this. I didn't watch it, but it sounds like sort of the idea I had.
Well,
This
again,
Ice Cube or whatever.
the best way to ever do a remake is to remake a bad movie. So I mean, somebody can always take that ball and run with it.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, so that was something I always like. And then the story behind it is also interesting because apparently Livingston was going to make a documentary about the Chesapeake Bay, which had become a environmental disaster. It's this thing that he says throughout interviews in the movie itself is that characters keep saying it's 40% dead. I don't know exactly what 40% dead entails, but that sounds really bad. When 40% of the life in the bay, which I don't know a lot about Chesapeake Bay. I don't know a lot about that part of the country. I've never been there before. I mean, have you ever been anywhere near Chesapeake Bay?
Oh
In
yeah,
in
I've actually gone swimming out there before,
Okay.
and
Okay. Well, that's
yeah,
cool.
so yeah, basically what they mean by like 40% life is dead is yeah, exactly what it says. Just out of what the normal ecosystem of the bay normally would be, 40% of that life is now dead, which means that there's less prey for predators to eat. There's less actual feed for the animals that are actually there, which usually means any animal that can't find its regular food supply in one place will end up moving on, and it's usually some place that humans dwell more than anything else. So
Right.
again, the life in a particular place dying is usually bad news for us, which is exactly what ends up happening here. Except they ended up feeding them steroid infused chicken shit, and that's how you got tongue eating lice.
Well, and apparently that part is like they said, he had all this documentary footage and then he found out there was already a Frontline documentary and he watched it and it was apparently good. So he decided, what am I going to do with all this research? I'll make a horror movie out of it. And then there's conflicting reports. He sort of says that he didn't know that found footage was a cool thing, and that he was when he's interviewed by Mother Jones and Yahoo Movie Talk. I was the two interviews I found. He says that, like, what inspired this, and he says, I don't know, I guess our town, because he's like a play guy. That's Barry Levinson is sort of, that's his thing. He works in stage plays too, and I can understand his reasoning is that that play has a sort of meta quality to it, but I think that because that I think he's just sort of lying at this point, that he doesn't want to make it seem like he was jumping in on a fad, because the screenwriter Zach Kirschner in a different interview claims that Livingston was had this information and was actively looking for people to pitch a Chesapeake Bay horror movie using his information, and he remembers distinctly being asked for found footage ideas. So I'm more likely to believe the screenwriter, honestly. Just either way, he took all this information, and a shocking amount of the information in this movie is true. There was a minor nuclear incident that eventually washed into the bay. They were dumping enormous amounts of steroid laden chicken shit into it, and there was massive pollution just from people dumping garbage in it. Like, these were all things that were true. The only part that's not true is that it didn't lead to tongue eating giant isopods, as far as we know.
Yep, except those things absolutely exist. And yeah, if ever there wasn't, like, that's like number two on the board behind like the cordyceps zombies from The Last of Us in
Yeah.
terms of things that are just haunting my nightmares from here forward.
Well, I've always I grew up in a desert. You know, I grew up in a place where if there's water in the wash, it means you got to move because it's going to be a flash flood and you got to get out of the way. And you can go up in the mountains and maybe go fishing. And then I don't like I've lived in the Midwest for 24, 23 years, and I don't swim in lakes because I think they're gross. I don't I if a totally harmless fish touched my leg, I would hate it. And then once every 5 years, we hear about some poor kid dying of a brain-eating amoeba that he got out of what it was the one from Lake Minnetonka is the one that Prince talks about.
Oh yeah.
Go into the waters of Lake Minnetonka, get a brain-eating amoeba, you die. And I don't
Oh,
really like
is
swimming
that
in
what
the
he
ocean.
meant by being cleansed by the waters in
Yes,
there? It's just
yes,
like he meant brain amoebas. Gotcha.
yes.
Okay.
He was. I mean, he was even meaner than he seemed in that scene. He was flat out. Yeah. Um, but and then I also don't like swimming in the ocean because it makes me feel sticky. I do like snorkeling, that's fun. But I get major agoraphobia in large bodies of water. I don't like not being able to see through it. So this movie is already pushing a lot of buttons for me in a way that a lot of, like, Jaws of course is scary, but a lot of movies that come out of Jaws aren't really scary because it never feels like you're actually out stuck in the water. And this movie has some good shots of people just hanging out in the water and just doing stuff that you would do every day that you would not worry about, and then getting infected with tongue eating isopods.
Right. And
And
my whole thing is just like, I'm not a big fan of the ocean, but I mean, like, there are plenty of beaches up here. Like, again, Upper East Coast, like,
yeah,
beach life is a thing, but like, they're so very tightly controlled. Where just like, as long as you don't go past a certain point, like, the water is filtered, jellyfish don't even usually get through. You're usually dealing with, like, tiny little crabs, if anything. And that's
yeah,
about the extent of it. At the same time, though, I have a massive insect phobia, which means stuff like isopods is my worst nightmare.
yeah. It's another thing with growing up in the desert is the worst things are the insects. So I know that they're to be avoided, but I'm not as afraid of them as a lot of people just because I had to see them constantly growing up. I think that's what I always assumed, that I know to avoid them, but I don't have
Yeah,
the
I
same
grew up in
phobia as some
apartment
people.
buildings, like
Yeah.
surrounded by cockroaches more than anything
Oh yeah,
else,
but
and
cockroaches are the worst though, man. Tucson
they
has some
really are.
nasty, nasty giant flying cockroaches. And they're I've seen scorpions and black widows crawl over me, and I got less freaked out than I did by a flying cockroach running into my head. And
Yeah,
totally harmless creature, disgusting and shouldn't exist.
yeah, like I have watched so many horror movies over the years with some really, really gnarly stuff, and to this day, nothing absolutely just gives me the nightmares for weeks on end than that one segment in Creep Show where E.G. Marshall is
Oh,
just being eaten alive by
yeah.
cockroaches by the end.
Yeah, no, that's great. So the things, the one of the ideas here is there's apparently a History Channel documentary called JFK: Three Shots That Changed America, directed by Nicole Rittenmeyer and Seth Sundrick. And this is specifically what Levinson went to Kirshner with and said, "Watch this movie. This is kind of what I want our movie to be." And I think that's a really important thing that they went with a made-for-TV documentary, because I think that this movie would not work as well if it didn't feel like a made for TV movie documentary. And it's really stuck in that post 9/11, you know, just, we're in 2012. I think this was actually made in 2009 though. And
Oh
then
wow.
there was a whole brand of sensationalist documentaries that were overcut like this movie is, like, chopping between scenes, having it turn black and white for no reason other than to just be creepy. Like, that was like a real thing in those days. There's a movie called Lake Mungo that does it perfect.
Oh yeah,
Lake
like the
Mungo is like,
Australian.
yeah, it is like watching a Discovery Channel ghost story thing that is like you just happen to be like, I that's why I don't think that the Bay would work on the big screen. I think it has to be seen on a TV screen, or because it has to feel like something you stumbled across. Um,
Right, and that's probably like my one of my few nitpicks about this, which is it does have that kind of this got on TV feel, even though it's kind of framed in a way where like the government doesn't want you to see this kind of
yeah, they kind of need to pick
situation.
one or the other in a way. Yeah.
Right, and like one of the things that made Cloverfield really work for me, across the board, is the fact that like it's framed as forbidden footage that like the government has classified, and when it starts to play out, I mean, there is no music.
Yes.
It's just the footage playing out as is, and just that entire movie just creeps my. Well, again, it's still a giant monster movie, but that movie still creeps my shit out to this day, just because there's no respite. It's just what they were capturing in the moment, and here is just the music is more intrusive than I would have preferred to just let the moments be scary on their own.
Yeah.
But
No,
even
the
still,
music.
the moments where it gets out of the way are still phenomenal.
I would go even further and say I think that sound design is bad in this movie. I watched it on Canopy, so it's possible that, but Canopy usually has good streaming, so I think I watched it as I was meant to see it. All the music is not only intrusive, but it's way too loud, and every to the point where you can't hear like just basic chatter. And then the narration gets overwhelmed by basic chatter in music sometimes. And then they use the biggest problem for me is they used canned effects. There is a specific scream that happens at one point that is one of like five screams that you hear on every Halloween scary sounds CD, you know. And it really cheapens the whole thing. And so yes, I not only agree with you, but I think I would go even further and say that this movie would be better without, not even, they could even still have music to have that sort of made for TV vibe, that it's this is a movie that's been put together, but it's just they do it wrong. It really hurts the whole film, I think.
Yeah, like the other nitpick I had was the fact that like Heather Donahue, who like I know from You're the Worst, I know she can do really good work, but they have her like she's in the middle of a situation where like there are dead bodies everywhere, and she just seems way too concerned with just like how she looks on camera and all that. And I know
Hmm.
that's part of the plot, but at the same time, like the second there's literally one dead body lying on the street, like all decorum should be going out the window, and it just kind of doesn't for way too long.
Yeah, I mean, when people are dying in this, they're really like they're vomiting blood and their skin's sloughing off, and it's pretty gnarly. I think that they actually make a mistake by trying to have it have a plot. I think that it's okay to have this central character who survived and is telling us the story, but trying to make her a character is less interesting, especially because she's a up and coming newscaster. You know, I find that annoying in real documentaries when they talk to newscasters who are making themselves part of the story. That always
Right.
bothers me.
Like instead of
So
getting the hell out of town, and
yeah,
in this case, just the fact that like she's just trying to further her career by hopefully having just the only footage of the event, and again, it just comes off as a little cheaper than it should.
yeah. Yeah, and so it ends up somewhere kind of between like the Cloverfields and Cannibal Holocausts, where you're like so into the artifice of the mockumentary and found footage that you're scared. It's hard to scare people with something. I mean, I've seen plenty of regular documentaries that are scary, but they don't really work in the same way that horror movies do. I counted two jump scares in this movie, one decent one not good one, and I just think that yeah, like you feel like you have to put jump scares in, I think is probably where Livingston was coming from, and I don't think it was necessary. And so every time we sort of are acknowledging that this is a horror movie for fun, I think it does sort of mess it up a little bit.
Right. And I don't know, I think the big jump scare that really almost took me out of it was that one near the end where just like this one corpse flops over that mom in the police car.
Yeah,
And like the jump scare did nothing for me, but like for a moment you see one of the little isopods crawl out of this corpse and crawl towards her kid. And that's the part where just kind of like my pulse immediately raised. And I
yeah.
was hoping they would do something with that, but they did not.
I think the movie Contagion comes out around the same time, and that movie is really scary. But that movie is very clearly a movie and a work of fiction, and it's doing movie tricks to us. Whereas this movie has it's separated by its mockumentary thing, and it's a little it can't quite get away with what it wants to do,
Right.
but I think they try really hard. I feel like this is something you could you know, the how more recently we have a lot of made for streaming sort of prestige true crime movies that are kind of the opposite of this, where they're actually under edited, like they're trying too hard to build a mood, and
Mhm.
they're underlit, and they're trying so hard to be spooky. I feel like you could take that model and make a more modern version. Like maybe it wouldn't work with isopods in Chesapeake Bay, but like make a scary documentary using the more recent tropes of sensationalized documentaries, of
For
TV
sure.
documentaries.
Although I will circle back on something that you mentioned earlier with the sound design, which, yeah, the music is overbearing and all that. But on the flip side of that, there are multiple examples in here of one of my favorite things, which is there's less gore in here than you think you saw. And a lot of that is because they do that thing where there's things happening off camera and all you can really hear is like a doctor sawing off a limb or
Yeah.
an isopod crawling out of a wound or the fact that like you can't actually see what the larva for the isopods look like but you can hear them crawling around. That stuff is fantastic and just absolutely gives me the creeps every time.
Well, and apparently part of the thing that was real about this movie is until they get to the large isopods, they were using real isopods.
Oh
Um
Jesus.
the only special effects ones were the much bigger ones, and then there's a sort of shot where they go into a dead fish to see the larva. Those larvas aren't real. Uh,
Right.
and there's a couple of shots with the big isopods that are you can see this movie doesn't have a lot of money on its side, and they're trying to have well integrated special effects that just aren't working. But you know, can't hold it against them, I guess.
Yeah, like for me,
Um,
like the big set piece of this was the one with the two cops where like one of them just walks into this
yeah,
house. And again, you all you can see is the outside of this house, but you can just hear this family like infected, just begging for someone to kill them,
Yeah.
and this one cop obliging, and that stuff is absolutely fantastic. And again, you don't see a damn thing,
I think that even though nobody mentioned it, I think that this movie had the Spanish movie Wreck on the brain.
which I
Just
still have not seen.
well, the thing that makes me think that is that Wreck is all built around the fact that a young newscaster is trying to get a story and stumbles into this horrible situation with zombies. And I just feel like you don't do a young newscaster thing without having that in mind. So that was, and then I think that the last third, fourth of the movie, where we start to suddenly follow this couple a lot more closely, I don't really get the balance there, but it sort of turns into to found footage 28 days later for a couple minutes, which is
Right.
kind of a cool idea. Like coming on, if they would have told the whole, if it was just a found footage movie, not a mockumentary, and it was all told from the point of view of this couple and their kid coming back into the bay and everyone's dead and they're figuring out what happened by finding the security cameras and stuff, I think that'd be an interesting way to go about it that might have worked a little better for them.
Yeah, arguably, like you could have done this as an anthology, where just like, okay, here's the footage from this one person who captured it. Here's the footage from this other person who captured it. But you would lose a lot of the editing effectiveness that's going on here as well. So I
Yeah.
don't know what the there's got to be a balance in there somewhere, but
Yeah, and I mean, you were talking about the acting. I think the acting's fine for what it is. I don't think the actors have much to go on. I have a feeling a lot of the dialogue was made
improv,
up,
yeah.
improv. Yeah. So yeah, it's hard to do naturalism without seeing forced, and I think most of the actors pull that off. The one cop that you're talking about, the survivor cop, the big black guy, that was a good little performance. He has one scene later where he's telling them to go away, or they can't come in, and he ends up killing himself. That's a good acting scene. That's
Oh
almost
yeah.
too good for the rest of the movie. uh,
Yeah, I gotta say, like I was hoping the mayor would have gotten it a lot worse than he
Okay,
did,
yeah.
but
I was just about to go to that note. So, I years ago I was doing research. I was going to write a book that I decided I don't know. I don't think I'm ever going to finish it. But I was doing research for a book about that decade after 9/11 and how horror movies got much more, obviously political and violent and angry. And this movie was great for me for that research because anytime they go to a web browser, because they will have, because it's set at 4th of July, there'll be the thing that the thing plays in, and then the other videos will be stuff about America, and then in a lot of shots there's a Osama bin Laden article that's just sitting in the corner of the screen, just like reminding us of what place and time we're in. And again, I think it was 2009 and it just didn't get released until 2012. And then the fact that it's the 4th of July, there's just American flags everywhere, so you have this excuse to have blood drenched American flags.
right.
I mean, it's obviously a socially aware movie. The whole point of the movie is to scare us into not polluting. But I just like the idea that you have that extra kind of heavy handed. So one of the things that happens is that I thought was a reference, but it was not. Is there's a part where the mayor drinks the water and says, "This is the best water in the world. There's
I
nothing wrong with it."
thought that was going somewhere else than it actually did.
Well, I was like, "Oh, this is a Flint. This has to be a Flint, Michigan thing." But it has to be consequential because even after this was released, not even taking into account that it took several years to come out, that Flint, Michigan thing didn't happen for another 2 years. The
Oh, wow.
the thing where they drank the water was like 2014.
Wow, so this is way ahead of that. But
Yeah, and so they were ahead of the. It's like, yeah, the idea of someone drinking water for a political stunt seemed like such an obvious nod to the Flint water crisis, but I guess it wasn't. It was just a coincidence. It was just another bad mayor in the Jaws vein. But yeah, the fact that the mayor just dies in a car accident is a real bummer. He really should have
right.
gotten just destroyed by isopods. Like,
Exactly.
the other note I have is I was comparing it to Contagion, and I said I said it to myself. I think Contagion is a movie about everybody doing their best and still failing, and this is a movie about no one taking responsibility and grinding everything to a halt with bureaucracy, so that an entire town dies just because no one wants to take responsibility and do anything about it or take it seriously. There's also this
Yeah, that
whole
was
implication of a cover up, but I think that's beside the point. I think most of it is about how nobody wants it really feels like helping.
yeah, like, and they go back to that, multiple times with the CDC, where it's just like there's every link in the chain is just like it's not so bad, it's not that bad. Somebody
Yeah,
will
are you
take care of it.
sure?
It's
Are
not
you
that bad.
sure? Yeah. And there's that poor doctor who is, I mean, you could make a whole movie from that doctor's point of view, the doctor who just has to lock himself in the hospital and keep sawing off limbs, trying to help people, knowing he can
Yeah, the
never
entire movie
bleed.
could have just been him, and it would
That
have been effective as hell.
that would be a really scary movie, like apocalyptic situation where a poor doctor can't do anything about it and he's just sawing off limbs to try to save people. Ugh.
Yeah, like having that responsibility in the middle of the apocalypse. Like, I was just talking about this with someone the other day where we were talking about Life of Chuck, and there's that whole beginning segment where, like, it's actually like, well, nobody won't spoil that part, but like the whole beginning part of the movie is the end of the world happening. And Karen Gillan is this doctor, and she just walks in one day and just like all the patients are already dead. Half the doctors didn't show up to work already. It's just her and like her assistant, and she's just sitting there just like, I had to come to work regardless, even though the building is empty.
Yeah.
And just, God, what that would do to a human mind, you can't even imagine. So you can just imagine what COVID would have been like for a lot of the real life doctors.
One of my favorite things about Why the Last Man is that you have like one character who is whole, she's just a garbage, she just decided someone needed to clean up the dead bodies, and so she just became a garbage woman and learned how to drive the truck and is picking up dead bodies, and that's just what she's doing because no one else is doing it. And those are the kind of apocalyptic stories that are like, yeah, what would I be doing? I would be doing something like that. I wouldn't be trying to lead people to salvation or fighting zombies. I would be trying to figure out, well, what little crappy job can I function at?
Yeah, exactly. And that's really what this movie comes down to as well, which is like nobody's willing to do just that tiny little job that would have saved a lot of lives.
Did you ever see, this is sort of related, did you ever see the ESPN 30 for 30 movie called June 17th, 1994?
No.
So it's one of the earlier 30 for 30s. It's a narrator free, like sort of tone poem clip show of all the sports that were on TV and were interrupted by OJ's highway chase.
Huh.
I think adding monsters, I should have said this earlier when we were talking about Cloverfield. I think adding monsters to that would just be such a cool movie because it's such an interesting thing where like it's just footage of a NASCAR race, and then oh, we have to cut away from the NASCAR race because this thing is happening that's ruining everybody's day. I mean, I suppose OJ running away from the cops is a much smaller deal than a monster killing everybody, but still, I don't know. It's always in the back of my mind. Really good movie. Highly recommend that one. Of all the there's a lot of good 30 for 30s, but that's just such an interesting movie from a purely filmmaking standpoint. It's a very cool
Yeah,
movie.
going back to what we were talking about before we got on the pod is, so what I'm waiting for somebody to actually do is for somebody to do a documentary about what pro wrestling was like during the pandemic, where they couldn't have anybody in the building. Like WWE went to their performance center to put on shows. AEW basically like rented out. Well, they had their own arena, but like they rented out empty arenas so they could do like their matches in a place with no crowds, no screens or anything. They had to get creative in a way that I don't know, it led to some of the most bizarre but also weirdly fulfilling art that's ever come out of that particular, sport entertainment kind of thing.
Yeah.
I need somebody to go into detail on that because it led to some weird places. Like you have stuff like, one, you found out just who among them was the who are the actual good actors among wrestling promotions, but also just who got more creative than anything else. Like AEW had a whole thing where like they would put on a Broadway musical where two of the biggest heels were just singing over champagne about how great they are. You had like WWE doing this really wonderful like breakdown slash Nightmare on Elm Street type torture to John Cena, where like Bray Wyatt was just shoving his entire flawed career back at him. I don't know. Just I feel like these kinds of situations lead to just really interesting creative choices. So, like you were saying, like even with any sport, like that has to get interrupted by the real world. Just seeing how they adjust is fascinating.
There was, I think, yeah, it was on HBO. called "The Day the Sport Stood Still" that mostly focused on basketball. That was fascinating, about how their decisions were made to stop playing, and then decisions were made to bring it back, but without audiences and stuff. That was a good one. So yeah, this is an interesting subject, and it's interesting for actual documentaries, and it's something that somebody needs to exploit more for horror movies, I guess, is what we're coming to here.
100%.
All right. So anything else on the Bay before we move on?
Not really, although I will say just some of the shots in there, especially because again I'm up in the east anyway, and like Massachusetts is some of
Yeah.
the best seafood in the world comes through here. Just these just continuing shots they keep having of just like entire oceans of just dead fish coming up was
Oh,
just so very eerie.
oh God. When I was a kid, teen probably, so in mid 90s, early 90s, my dad took me, he's from Milwaukee, and he took me to go, he's like, "Have you ever seen Lake Michigan?" I said, "No." And so he took me to do a walk along the pier at Lake Michigan. And there was probably 40 feet of dead fish before you could see, like on the pier and on the shore, just dead fish for almost 40 feet, and then finally water.
Oh God.
And it was another core memory. It was so fucking gross. So I think it's some of that. Now that you've said that, I think some of that comes out at me when I see this movie. I remember just going, "Ugh, is this how it always is?" And my dad was like, "Ugh, no, I don't think so. Something must have gone wrong."
Yep. And circling back to what I was talking about earlier as well, where it's just like it's kind of in the air, is one of the images that always sticks with me with Death Stranding and that they stuck with the sequel this year is this whole idea that like when you die everybody has this thing called a beach, which is kind of like the last thing you get to before whatever actual death becomes. And representing it as this beach, it's just full of just dead sea creatures no matter where you are in this particular version of the afterlife. And something about just ecological horror just always bringing up just like the animals will go first and just makes
Yeah.
them more distressing
Yeah.
is again, I think it's just tapping into something that might be going on where just like we know nature's about to kick our asses hard for what's being done to the planet.
It's like a sea of dead fish and birds flying away from something that you can't see. Those are like two perfect horror images for big disasters.
Yep, that and rats running away because
Rats running
whatever
away.
happens, yep, we
Something's
follow
coming.
them.
It's nearby. Better run with the rats. Yeah. Yeah, there's that terrible, not, no, I shouldn't say terrible, but not very good movie, The Core. And the one really cool thing in The Core is that a bunch of birds die because the core of the magnetic core of the Earth is so messed up that they're just flying into things. That was a
Right.
cool, and scary apocalyptic idea, I thought, in an
Oh
otherwise not
man, I was sitting here trying to remember what I just watched that had a whole rats running away from like a horrible situation thing, and I remembered it was the remake of The Running Man because there's a
oh,
whole
okay.
thing where like Glenn Powell's stuck in a basement and he just sees the rats running away from this fire and they find the sewer. But that also brings it back to again stuff going on this year is the fact that his like Ben Richards' job in that remake is literally using high explosives to blow up fatbergs.
Yeah, I mean, shit, that's gonna be a
Yeah,
job someday.
yeah, exactly. Like that's just going to be a thing that we're going to have to live with. But again, all this stuff is just out there now, and I'm just really, I don't know. I'm not looking forward to when life starts imitating art.
Yeah, I mean, we can pretend that I was being really prescient with this choice, but really, I just wanted to talk about Godzilla versus Ghidorah. But we'll pretend that I was, because I haven't seen any of these things you're talking about. I have not been keeping up with movies, and I think the only newish game I've played is I ended up really wanting to play the latest Dragon Quest. Was what, not Dragon Quest?
Dragon Age.
Dragon, yeah.
Oh
I
yeah.
think that's the newest game I've played all year. I think that's the
Oh
only
wow.
newish game I played all year. I just haven't been able to, get the money around to get them. All right. Well, let's this. I have the least to say about this one, but let's move on to our final of three movies. Basically I wanted to cover one more recent film, and I wanted to cover one movie that I hadn't seen yet. And I sort of came up with a list of three what was the one you suggested, Justin? I can't remember now.
In the Earth.
In the Earth, and I decided against that one because I realized I don't really like that director very much. But he has made movies I've liked, so I know it's always a hit and miss. But then I had it down to The Feast, from the Welsh movie from 2021, which is the one we went with, and I was also thinking about watching Gaia, which sounds really interesting. Was also, I think, from 2021. We ended up going with The Feast because it just sounded more in line with what we were talking about in it, and from the description. And it ended up, at the beginning I thought I fucked up and that it had nothing to do with anything, and then I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, no, this is
Yep.
right. This works. But this is a, yeah, I had not seen this movie like the other two. The basic plot, and I'm just going to break down because this is another tone poemy, very vibey kind of movie. It's very much what when we use the forbidden nomenclature of elevated horror, this is very much what springs to mind. So the plot is not super important, but the idea is that there's this upper crust politician, and he has this family full of freak in yuppies, basically, and they invite an oil, a really gross oil and precious metals baron to a fancy dinner in hopes of convincing one of their wealthy neighbors to sell their farm to do more drilling. And the wife hires a local girl, they say, like from the village, because it's, again, it's in Wales, so I think parts of Wales are particularly I don't know anything about Wales. I know that Christine's family comes from Wales, and that's about all I know about Wales. But I'm guessing there's still quite a bit of rural villages out in Wales, is what this movie is implying. This local girl comes to help prepare food, and she is not what she seems, and she seems very confused. And so at first it's like, oh, this is a fish out of water thing. She's just from, but no, she's not what she seems. And I think, well, I'll end up spoiling some of it as we go on talking about it, but that's the basic setup. And I want to make sure people understand this is a Welsh film in Welsh. I'm not even going to try to pronounce its real title because Welsh is notoriously hard to pronounce if you're not Welsh. And this is not to be confused with the 2005 movie Feast, which was made as part of Project Greenlight. Though I will say that movie fucking sucks. But man, the third season of Project Greenlight may be the greatest single season of reality TV ever made.
And the thing that always pisses me off when I'm looking for stuff like that is there's also a script from the Wachowski sisters called Feast
Yes, that's
that
right.
that never got made, and it's one of my favorite things that I wish they would circle back to one day. But my god, that is a very different ride for any of this, and just every time I realize like that's not the Feast that got made, just angries the blood.
Well, I mean, there's a 2016 movie called The Feast or Feast. There's a 2020 movie. There's a different 2021 film that's not this one. There's a 2022 film. Basically, every year you have at least one movie called either The Feast or Feast. Uh, this one is Welsh movie directed by Lee Haven Jones and is written produced by Roger Williams. I unfortunately don't know much else about him. I tried to do research on him. There's just not a lot out there. Because it's in Welsh, this has that same thing that happens in a lot of like Indian movies, Bollywood movies, where it's mostly in Hindi or whichever language it's in. But every once in a while, somebody will say something in modern English. And this movie has one of the best cuts to modern English that made me, I don't even know how funny it was supposed to be, but the oil baron guy is saying a bunch of stuff in Welsh and acting cool, and then he drops his bottle of wine and says, "Oh, for fuck's sake," just in plain old English. And it made me laugh so hard that was the one kind of break. And then also, yeah, the only other things I've seen, that Jones directs a lot of British television. He did Doctor Who, Cold Water, and he did a show called The Bay, which has no relation to the movie called The Bay that we just talked about. And that was pretty much my research right there. Uh, Even if I would have bought the Blu-ray, it seems like there's only one 12-minute long featurette, so I just don't think I was going to be able to find a lot of information about this without sending emails out to people, which is a level of research I was just not having the time or spirit to do.
Yeah,
And I
my
think,
biggest question with all this, as a matter of fact, was just again mildly spoilery country, but just I know that there's some spirit that is driving kind of like all the really fucked up supernatural stuff in this story. Which like spirit is it? Does it have a name? Like, is it one from like Welsh folklore that I should know about?
Yeah,
And there just isn't enough about it in there.
yeah, and Welsh folklore. I mean, that's where you get a lot of Halloween stuff is from Welsh folklore. So Welsh folklore, I guess you would call this a folk horror movie, which is kind of like an up and coming. Like everybody decided we all like folk horror movies, which I agree, and I'm happy that we've decided this now. But it is sort of a hot topic right now, so that's probably something that would get people to watch this film. But I would say, just from the only real major critical thing I have here is that this definitely does fit in what I think of. I use the term elevated horror because I think it describe I think it's shitty because it says that other horror isn't elevated, but I think it and has ended like torture porn is a stupid term that doesn't describe what it's talking about, but now has become a certain period in time in popular horror. So I use torture porn. So I'm going to use elevated horror. This is what I would say is the middle grade of the movement. It's good but not great, and it fits in with these other European movies like Goodnight Mommy, The Hatching, and You Won't Be Alone, which I all saw within the last couple years. It's yeah, cool stuff happening. Maybe every scene goes on 6 seconds too long. um, and they really go out of their way to not describe anything. And there's the photography is really nice. It's that really nice digital photography that's not too dark, which is a problem we're having more recently, I think. But it's not like Get Out or The Babadook, which are like generationally defining works. This is just going to be a movie that will be brought up when we're talking
Yeah,
about the
this one's
European
more of just a
ambient.
simple folk tales kind of story. It's just, I don't know, whenever anyone talks about like elevated horror, the thing that always comes to mind is just listening to someone on like Hell's Kitchen or something like that go up to Gordon Ramsay and says, "Chef, what I prepared for you is a deconstructed,
Yeah,
whatever the hell it is."
yeah.
And this is definitely like a revenge story that's just kind of deconstructed to the point where you just have to be very patient for the payoff. And I do think the payoff is worth it when you finally get where they're going with it. But it is just a lot longer than I don't want to say it should be, but a
No,
lot
because it's
longer than
actually
you
a
would
pretty short.
expect.
It's actually a pretty short movie overall, but it might have made a better like piece in a. This is something that comes up a lot when I'm doing reviews and genre grinder stuff. But I think this might have worked a little better as part of an anthology, like a 3-part horror
Hmm.
ecological horror anthology thing. Might
Yeah,
have worked
because
a
there
little
really
better.
isn't all that much there with this, aside from just the process of putting together this big dinner and like why exactly they're doing it. So yeah, there really isn't that much to it aside from the very process of watching this girl go through these very strange rituals that you're kind of thinking, okay, where's she going with this? But then once it kind of clicks in where she's going with this, and that's the thing I was wondering from you, just like when did you figure out exactly what was going on with this girl?
Well, my first okay, so yeah, we're just gonna end up spoiling this. We won't spoil how everything happens, but as the movie goes on, I started to think, oh, her name's uh, Cardi or Cody, but they
Cuddy,
kind of sounds like they're saying Cardi. I kept on thinking Cardi B, Cody,
yeah.
uh,
Oh,
and
Cardi B in this movie would be a very different
very
ride.
yeah, that would actually be kind of cool, honestly, if they sort of shot it like a Hype Williams music video and had a Cardi B in that spot instead,
Oh
but
no, now
everything
I want
else
to
was the
see
same.
this. Oh no.
That would be great.
Right.
Um, but anyway, yeah. So at first she's just sort of a bumpkin, and so I'm like, she's gonna do something. And so my first thought was she's gonna be offended by these people and kill them, or she is um, uh, already here from on behalf of the village people to take out these assholes. Because as soon as you realize, oh, they're trying to convince someone to sell their land, you're like, okay, yeah, something bad's happening here. And then I was like, maybe she's like a witch because she's doing witch things.
That was my assumption at first too.
But then eventually it's like, oh no, she is like I mean, they say she's a goddess. I read the description later. But it's almost like she's just nature. She is the representation of nature. And I think part of what I really liked about it is that there's a little bit of that Jesus thing in there, in that you get the feeling she is actually trying to understand the humans. She's not coming in assuming she's going to kill them all. There's like a part of her that's like, okay, I'm going to understand who these people are. Or the same thing like we were talking with Save the Green Planet, where like an alien came to decide if we were okay people and then got tortured nearly to death. So he said, yeah, yeah, fucking burn it down. But I feel like
Right.
she's actually trying to sort of like, what are these people about? Like I need to experience a mortal life to understand why they're ruining my area, my realm. And she just runs into the worst people in the world. They're either drug addicts or they're the one brother is a drug addict. The other brother is sort of this super ultra gross version of a whole bunch of manosphere types. Like he only eats raw meat instead of the food that's been prepared for him. He's obsessively touching his skin all the time. He's got a very Aryan Brotherhood type haircut. So she meets him, a kid who is so addicted to drugs that he is injecting. God. So one of the gross things that happens in this movie is the drug addict kid. She is once we figured out what's going on, she is actually starting to poison the meal, but it seems like it's actually by accident at first. She's so disgusted that they're killing and eating rabbits. She's just horrified by the idea, and she accidentally barfs inside the food, and it's not clear if she's done this on purpose to spread something bad or if she's just barfed in the food and is embarrassed and just mixes it in. So
Yeah,
that's
the impression I got was like, she threw up just because she realized, oh god, it's rabbit. But then she was looking at this, she was like, wait a second, I have the idea to do the most hilarious thing ever.
yeah. So she has that, and then this one brother takes some of the meat and excuses himself from the table to shoot heroin, and for some reason decides to mix his heroin with some of the meat and I guess a brandy or something and shoot it into his foot, which is already a metaphor. He's dropped an axe on it, an axe head on it. It's very much it's something that Guillermo del Toro loves to do, where what the villain is sort of rotting throughout the story. Big one in The Shape of Water, where
Yeah, the
uh, my
gangrenous finger. Oh
yeah, Michael.
god.
Yeah, he's trying to get his finger back on, and it's just not going to work. And so this guy, he's cut down trees, so he's sinned, and and so like karma, nature karma made him drop the axe on his foot. So he had already got an infection, and now he's injecting meat heroin in between his toes. It's very it's borderline comedic, and so she's run into the worst people in the world, and so she pretty quickly decides that, yeah, I'm just going to have to separate these people and kill them in various ways.
Yeah.
And I guess I won't
Yeah.
go too much into some of the nasty. It's a pretty gross movie,
Yeah, I
but
also
like,
think it's funny. Like, so again, you had that whole scene where like that one son is injecting just all sorts of random shit in between his toenails. And it's funny you didn't want to do In the Earth though, because there's that same thing going on with that altered states in particular as well, where just you have just these white people going into nature, finding out, oh, this particular compound will give you a particularly strong trip, and every single time in these horror movies, something horrible happens that was not supposed to happen while you're on these drugs. Yeah,
yeah,
even though like again, like they're very clear about the instructions, and every single time it's just sort of like, what if I injected this into my eyeballs directly? I wonder.
yeah. And there's part of it, honestly, that I'm a gore hound. I love gory movies, but there is part of this that this movie is scarier from like a spiritual standpoint. So there's something that happens sometimes with horror movies where you get enough gore in there and it actually it's a relief to me. It's become a movie again, you know what I mean? Whereas I think this movie had the chance to be a little bit more drony and like really like have this existential thing going on that is sort of overdone by how silly some of the violence, or not even violence, it's just gore. It's like there's like a difference between violence
Yeah.
and gore, I guess, and this is it.
Yeah, like by the end, like there's just this immediate, like not even like it's not a gradual thing from when the dinner ends up until the end of the movie. It's just a switch flicks, and the mom in particular just loses her absolute goddamn mind.
Yeah.
Where I think like a more gradual, like there's the other friend that they invite to dinner, the one who's like actually, trying to develop the land,
Yeah.
where all of a sudden he's just sort of like, I'm hungry, and all of a sudden starts acting like a pig, which is like, yes, that's the right destination. Yes, it's the right person to happen to, but there's no lead into that for whatsoever.
Yes. It's sort of like her presence eventually, because she is for a while separating people to kill them. But it's sort of like after a while, her presence just sort of turns them again, which I might have maybe should have gone one way or the other. I don't know. This is not a complex metaphor. This is also very obviously critical of capitalism and materialism. There's this whole visual theme that I think works pretty well, where she produces mud when she touches things. And the mother is obsessed with the cleanliness and the modernness of this whole house. And there's like one piece of art, and that's the one thing that Cotty is attracted to. But like she'll leave a muddy handprint, and the mom will be like, "What the fuck are you doing?" And then she'll look, and there's no mud, and she's like, "Oh, it must have come from somewhere else." But it's this idea, this image of nature, like this Mother Nature figure, sort of taking over this ultra materialistic space, you know. And it's all about the moral failing of these people as part of the environmental horror in this case. Whereas Godzilla versus Hedorah isn't really have a moral failing. It's just that we let it get out of control, and now here we.
Yeah, the part that got me in this, which I really love the central, like, the girl that shows up and ends up, bringing all this supernatural stuff to this house. But the thing I really loved about it is the fact that she does not speak except to sing. And
Yes.
that was kind of the moment that I realized, like, oh yeah, something very witchy is going on here, which was
Yes, like she
like,
was, I
yeah,
thought she was making spells.
yeah, I won't even think that. It's just the fact that, again, nature doesn't sing except for in music, which I thought was a really pretty way to convey, what is obvious by the end. But I think that was more gradual than anything else, which is why I asked, like, when did you figure it out? When she started
Right.
singing after not speaking for the rest of the movie, that's kind of when it clicked for me.
Yeah, for me, I was still thinking maybe she has to sing a spell. I was still kind of on that. This is a environmental horror movie, but this is also another genre that is a surprisingly prolific genre that I'm going to call dinner party horror.
Mm.
That a couple I thought of pretty recent movies, The Invitation, Would You Rather, The Perfect Host, The Menu.
Oh yeah.
There's literally a movie called The Dinner Party, which I've never seen, but it sounds like it's part of this. It's the idea
Yeah.
that I think it's a solid concept because it's trapping characters in a limited space, which works really well for some horror stories. Again, it works better for shorter horror stories. That's why I'm going back to the anthology idea here. But it traps them in a limited space, and it makes people interact with each other, which you can build suspense in that people have secrets from each other. People are angry at each other and not telling each other, and now it's going to come out. It's a really good dramatic horror thing.
Yeah, I'm thinking of
um,
like Ready or Not, You're Next.
yes, Your Next has a really good kind of version of that. It's not the whole movie, but yeah, for sure. I was trying to think like what's the first version of this, and I'm like, is it Titus Andronicus? And I think, not being a even remotely clever person when it comes to literature, I'm going to say it was Titus Andronicus, because that has the scene at the end where the title character reveals that he's baked an enemy's sons into the pie that he now served her, which
I mean, I
kind of.
suppose if you want to go about it that way, I mean, the first one would be The Last Supper.
Oh yeah, I
Just
mean, I
sort of like,
guess
hey,
okay.
yeah,
And
one
that's
of you
all.
motherfuckers betrayed me, and it's the Son of God. Good job, you asshole.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of these movies have that in it too. I didn't catch any real major Last Supper vibes from this one in particular, but like a lot of those other movies I mentioned have a Last
But
Supper thing.
I actually thought about that, and I think it's actually more the reverse, because you have just this one person that they invited there just for the fact that they want her land.
Yes.
And they're all trying to impress her in like these different ways. Like, one of them keeps going on about these rabbits he shot. The other one's going on about the money. Like, the wife's going on about, like, this expensive house that I'm able to afford
Yeah.
because I'm able to destroy the earth. And through
And
all
the
of that,
sons are
like,
just gross, the worst
yeah, the
people
sons are
ever.
just gross. And she just shows up and she's like, yep, this is all nice, but, like, I have my farm, I make enough money, my husband's, got a job. I don't need any of this. It's the reverse of that entire situation.
Well, and then if we're talking about reverses, the other thought I had is that this is, in a sort of roundabout way, a reverse version of Darren Aronofsky's Mother, in that it
Mm.
is this sort of, instead of, well, it's not even, yeah, because Mother Nature, the spirit of Mother Nature is coming into someone else's house, instead of, in Mother, the spirit of the Mother Nature has all these other assholes who are all biblical allegories, but are also sort of the same kind of people in the context of the movie. They're like braggarts and materialistic assholes that then ruin her life. It's like the opposite, where this time Mother Nature goes into a house and ruins all these braggarts, and in anti-environmental people's lives.
Yeah, I
It's
think
not,
it's the difference between it being a Christian allegory versus a pagan allegory.
yeah,
Because again, like the Christian allegory, it's like everything is in worship of this mother, and then just the message just gets corrupted over time.
yeah,
Meanwhile, with pagan, it's just like, hey, we all live on part of the earth, and you better respect it or else.
yeah, yeah. Okay, that's good. I like that. Yeah, I mean, as someone who's been never raised Christian, for me, the movie Mother was very obvious metaphor, but it was also, I felt that movie was a dark comedy, and I don't know if I was supposed to see it that way, but that's the
Oh,
way
it's
I
definitely
enjoyed it.
funny from most of
Yeah,
it.
I mean, the stuff with the sink is hilarious, where she keeps
Yeah.
telling people to stop sitting on the sink, and they keep. I mean, that's just that movie reminds me of what's the Scorsese movie, After Hours. It's like just
Mm.
ev- everybody's ruining this one person's life. But anyway, I was just, that isn't really a dinner party. I guess Mother does have dinner party aspects, though. It
Yeah,
has
they
like
do have dinner
multiple.
multiple times. They're sitting around
Yeah,
talking about random stuff, and again, the not being able to escape these people is all over that. And yeah, she just keeps having to get in these situations where she has to be in close contact with them, and it doesn't go well.
Mother is a much more maximalist movie. I think this is, for the most part, a minimalist movie until the end. But I
Yeah,
don't
it's
know. They
also
might make a kind of interesting double feature.
I would say triple feature because again, I've been thinking about this since I saw it. But
Hmm.
Die My Love for this year feels like the perfect double feature with Mother.
Okay.
But also just circling back with everything with Feast is it's this idea of Jennifer Lawrence playing this woman who all of a sudden, like, she's done the things, she has a house, she has a husband, she's given birth, and after her giving birth, just her body and everything that she's worked for, like this place that she's built, no longer belongs to her, and she loses her absolute goddamn mind over it. So I think that's kind of like the more atheist, I guess, approach to
Okay.
that exact same idea, where it's just like, once mom's work is done, like she doesn't exist anymore. And she has to yell and scream and just go way over the edge in order to still feel acknowledged, I guess.
God, imagine if Jennifer Lawrence made a remake of The Feast, and then we have the Jennifer Lawrence trilogy of this same basic theme.
Yeah, not gonna lie, it kind of already is. I won't spoil how that film goes, but there's a lot of parallel, especially since the last little bits do involve a forest and running into random people who may or may not be real. And is she actually part of all of this, or is she just some force of nature? Again, they tie in pretty well, actually.
I do have one note about, there's not a lot going on in the dialogue. It's kind of the point, is that these people are vapid, but there is one line where the drug addict brother, who is the nicer of the two brothers, tries to calm Cotty down because she's upset about the shooting rabbits, and he says that the dad shoots rabbits because he wishes he could shoot his political opponents and parents, which does not calm her down.
Mm.
But yeah, the fact that I don't remember if they say specifically what he is. I assume he's some sort of like council person, or maybe a mayor or something, but I don't think they ever say flat out what his exact job is.
Yeah, he just says he's on the council, but they don't go any further than that. So he's probably
Yeah.
some higher up in some part of London. But
Or at least, yeah, I don't know, what's the biggest city in, Christine, what's the biggest city in Wales?
Give me a sec. Cardiff.
Cardiff. Maybe he's like a
mm,
Cardiff, representative. who moved his house out into the boonies. Then, because that's a classic, that's colonialism in miniature kind of thing. Where, I mean, I don't think it was a great movie, but I enjoyed watching it, and I'm happy I watched it, and I'm happy how well it fit with our theme here, while still being completely different from the other two movies and
Yeah,
of
for
its
sure.
era too. I accidentally sort of picked three movies. That one is a very much early '70s movie, one is very much a late 2000s movie, and one is very much an early 20s, late 20 teens movie.
Yeah, that was my other question with this was this a pandemic movie?
Oh, that's a good question. I wouldn't be surprised. Again, there's hardly any notes on it, but that would make sense
Exactly, yeah.
because yeah, you just have one location and you're
Yeah,
out
like
in the
five people,
country.
and then that's it, and they all have to. Yeah, you're rural enough where you don't have to worry about distancing and all that.
Yeah,
So
I bet you're right. That would make sense.
it would make sense why she would have to separate everybody else, so you don't have like everybody in every scene together.
Yeah. 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 Pandemic comes up a lot. I'm glad that I didn't rewatch The Bay during the pandemic. I think that would have upset me.
Yeah, I would have lost my all my marbles watching that one at the time.
Yeah. A little too much dead bodies in the street action going on.
Right.
Do you have any other notes on any of the movies we talked about here, or like, do you have any other environmental horror movies that you had in mind that we didn't watch?
Well, again, like I did rewatch In the Earth just for this, just
Okay.
for the sheer cloud of it. I do, even if you're not a fan of Ben Wheatley, it's different enough from the rest of his work where I think it's worth a shot. But
Yeah.
especially in this context where it's very much like these two people go out in nature and it's a place where just nature is more dominant than even normal and have them having to navigate through all that. It's a very different sort of experience that you might be thinking from Ben Wheatley for one. I as I was mentioning, like Die My Love reminded me a lot of this, of just this vibe of just this one
Mm,
woman who has this connection to her land that her husband and the rest of the family and the other people she comes across part of her circle absolutely don't, and just what that does to her emotional state, realizing that she doesn't have any control over that.
hmm.
Again, that's going to be one of the best films of the year for me, so I do
Cool.
recommend going to see that, especially if you can go to a theater for it.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I already talked about Thaw, which again isn't very good, but if you got 90 minutes in your day and want to watch a monster movie, it's a clever concept. And there's a movie called Blood Glacier that's kind of the same thing. Also not very good, but a cool idea that the glacier melts and ancient uh, uh, creatures and germs and stuff come out of it.
I
So,
feel like that's a Death Clock song, either that's
yeah,
already happened or waiting to happen.
yeah. And then there was a what's it? There's one about oil, Larry Fessenden movie. It wasn't Wendigo. It was sort of a sequel to Wendigo, and it was called. Oh Jesus! He makes a lot of movies. He makes a lot of movies. Boy, this guy just cranks them out. Crazy because then he didn't make the movie based on the video game he made,
I know.
and apparently the movie sucked and had nothing in common with the game. Is what I'm
Yeah,
hearing.
like all the stuff that they could have pulled in, for fuck's sake, they have an Oscar winner as part of the video game cast, and you couldn't even pull him back. Yeah, I
Oh
have
yeah,
no idea
that's
what
right.
happened on that movie.
Yeah, weird.
Yeah, Remy Malek's the main villain in that.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Oh, it's called The Last Winter. It's a pseudo sequel to Wendigo about environmental impact of oil drilling in the Arctic. It kind of reminded me of the latest season of True Detective in a way.
Oh, okay.
There's a little bit like that. Ron Perlman's in it.
Going back to my realm of expertise as well, there was a game that came out last year called Still Wakes the Deep, which
Okay.
is basically like you start out as this Scottish dude on this oil drill. They like he's about to get fired. He's on his way off the drill, and then the drill actually hits something. You never see what it is exactly. All you know is that all of a sudden, like there's this unearthly light that comes out of there. Like there's all these like Lovecraftian monsters that start snatching off the crew. Like people start going insane, start being fused into living flesh in the walls, And it's this dude just trying to get off of this oil drill after they hit on something supernatural. And if that was a movie, it would have been perfect for this podcast. But as it is, it's a, I think, roughly 4 or 5 hour game. It's worth checking out, especially as part of, I don't know, if you want to see like environmental horror done really, really well interactively, that's another place to go.
I suppose Lovecraft really does work well with environmental horror because he was so afraid of the water and the
Going out,
things coming out
yeah.
of it. And then you can have the whole idea that old gods are coming back to fuck us up for fucking things up or something. Yeah, it does. It
Yeah,
lines up
like
pretty
I'm
well.
not overly afraid of the ocean because I'm never fucking going all that deep into it. But the
Yeah,
whole idea that like we know more about outer space than we do about the ocean
yeah,
absolutely terrifies me, and that's kind of why underwater horror works so well.
yeah, yeah. They don't even have to be giant. They can be semi-large isopods, and that's enough. The
Yeah,
size
like
of a small cat.
in looking up stuff after watching The Bay, as a matter of fact, like I ended up getting this video in Facebook Reels of all places from somebody who was talking about all of these. Well, I'm talking about a whole bunch of different animals that live in like, the abyssal part of the ocean, and one of which is this species of squid, which isn't even a giant squid, but they travel in packs and they're intelligent enough where they're curious enough about humans. If they see one, they will like, swim up and see what's going on. And in an instant, they can turn red, and their nerve conduction velocity is so fast that they can basically start ripping you apart before you'd even have the thought that you're in danger.
Great.
And they just live deep enough in the ocean where that would be something else to worry about.
Right, right. And someday they might decide to venture forth. I don't know. Maybe global warming will chase them out.
Yeah, let's not think about that.
Okay. All right. Well, in that case, where can the people find you?
I can be found mostly on Slant Magazine, so slantmagazine.com, mostly in their game section, but they do have me reviewing a whole lot of movies and TV recently. Occasionally, you can find me on GameSpot. Again, there's a lot of best of 2025 stuff I'm probably going to be involved in the next couple of weeks. Occasionally on Kotaku when they decide to hire me. But I also have my own YouTube channel. It's just Justin of Clark on there. Again, like I'll end up doing my own Game of the Year video that'll be up sometime in December.
Cool. Yeah, I have to. I always forget to say there is a Genre Grinder YouTube page, but it's just the podcast. I haven't put anything else on there really. But otherwise you can find me as per usual on the Genre Grinder website, where I am still posting reviews. There's a lot of shit coming out at the end of the year. We got Shawscope Volume 4, which is full of horror movies, which is very exciting because I just watched them for a podcast. It's be easy reviews to write, but I'm very excited to own copies of them. You can find me on both Letterboxd and Blue Sky as just Gabe Powers, one word. And you can check out the Genre Grinder Cares t-shirt and sticker sale. There is a link to it at the top of the Genre Grinder website. And I've got a couple designs on there. And all the money is currently going, all the money I get, all of the profit is currently going to Gender Justice, who has been helpful in keeping trans people safe in Minnesota. Until next time, be sure to reduce, reuse, and recycle. Good night.
Come raise your voice. Say